It's Thursday, and you know what that means.
It's time for another deep dive.
Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes from the Source. This is episode number 8, and I'm so glad you're all here with us today. I'm really excited about what we're going to be exploring today.
Me too.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about something that I think is very relevant to every single person listening,
Absolutely.
and that's the challenge of breaking free from, well, let's be honest, habits that we wish we didn't have.
Right, those ones that kind of feel like they're holding us back a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And, as listeners of this show, you guys are really here to go deep. You're not here for just the surface level stuff. You want those like aha moments, right? You want that real understanding and you want it efficiently. You don't want to have to wade through a ton of information to get to the good stuff.
You want the gems.
You want those gems, exactly. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a real deep dive into specifically some of the teachings from Gurudev's book, An Intimate Note to a Sincere Seeker.
Yeah, there's a particular chapter in there that we're going to be focusing on that really unpacks the nature of habits and gives us this, I think, really practical and powerful tool for transformation.
Right.
And that is the concept of vows.
Vows, yeah. Because, I think it's safe to say that, all of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, we have those automatic behaviors, those things that we do or think or react to in a certain way without even really thinking about it.
It's like we're on autopilot.
Yeah, it's total autopilot. And some habits, they're great. They serve us well.
Yeah, they get us where we need to go.
Absolutely. But others, not so much, right? They feel like they're in conflict with who we really want to be or how we want to live our lives. And the struggle to break free from those, it can be honestly incredibly frustrating. Like we know what we want to do, but we just can't seem to get ourselves to actually do it.
Right, and that gap between our intentions and our actions, that's a really common human experience.
Yeah, it's a universal struggle, I think. And the teachings that we're going to be talking about today, they offer, I think, a really interesting perspective on this whole dynamic. And a key part of that is this idea of vasanas.
Vasanas. So think of these as these like deep impressions, these grooves that are formed in our minds based on our past experiences and actions. And a lot of times they operate unconsciously. We're not even really aware of them.
They're like under the surface.
Under the surface, yeah.
Pulling the strings, sort of.
Exactly. And they really influence our thoughts, our behaviors, our reactions to things. It's like these well-worn paths that our minds tend to just automatically follow.
Okay, so vasanas, unseen grooves in the mind. That's a pretty powerful image. I like that. So let's dig into this a little bit deeper. Let's talk about habits themselves, these chains of the mind, as you put it. Like how do they actually form in the first place? What's the mechanism that turns a conscious choice, something that we do once, into this automatic program that just runs on its own?
Well, what's fascinating is that it really comes down to this cumulative effect of repetition. So each time we do something, think something, react in a certain way, it strengthens a particular neural pathway in our brain. It's almost like, imagine walking across a field. The first time you do it, there's no path. You're just forging your way.
We're making your own way.
But then you walk it again and again and again. Eventually you have this like clear path, this deep groove forms. And then you naturally just follow that path without even thinking about it.
It becomes the default.
It does. It becomes the default, yeah.
And that's kind of how our habits work. We repeat something enough times and boom, we've created a groove in our minds.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've wired ourselves, essentially.
We have.
But then the question becomes like, why are those unwanted habits so sticky? We know they're not serving us, right? Logically, we understand this isn't good for me. So why can't we just stop? What's the hook that keeps us, coming back for more, even when we know we shouldn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, to really understand that, we have to look at some of our inherent human tendencies.
Okay.
And one of the most powerful ones at play here is our comfort zone.
Okay, comfort zone.
Yeah, because even a negative habit can feel oddly secure, simply because it's familiar. Our minds, they crave predictability, even if it's not ultimately beneficial for us.
Right. So it's like, even if it's not good for me, at least it's what I know.
Exactly.
It's that devil, kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. It's like staying in a lukewarm bath, even though, a hot shower would feel amazing.
Right. Okay, so comfort zone, that's one.
That's one. And then we have this powerful force of instant gratification.
Okay.
Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And a bad habit It often provides that quick hit of dopamine.
Oh, that dopamine hit.
Yeah, that little
Yeah.
rush of feel-good chemicals, even if it's followed by negative consequences later on. Think
Gotcha.
about, scrolling endlessly through social media.
Hmm.
You get that little ping of connection or distraction, but then later you just feel drained and empty.
It's the quick fix. It feels good in the moment, but
But not so much later.
yeah. Okay, so comfort zone, instant gratification. What else keeps us stuck in these patterns?
Well, another big factor is simply a lack of awareness.
Okay, a lack of awareness.
So many of our habits, they operate on autopilot. We're not even thinking about them, we just do them. And they're often triggered by very specific cues or situations. We might not even realize how often we're engaging in a certain behavior or how much of an impact it's having on our lives until we really start paying attention.
It's like background noise that you don't realize is there until it stops, and then you're like, oh, it was actually really loud.
Exactly.
Okay, so lack of awareness. We're running these programs in the background without even knowing it.
We are. And then
And-
we have our inherent resistance to change.
Oh, yeah, change is hard.
It is. Stepping outside of our established patterns, it takes effort. It can feel uncomfortable, even scary sometimes. We might be afraid of failing, or we might not like the effort required to learn something new. Or maybe we're just scared of the uncertainty of what life might look like without that familiar habit, even if it's a bad one.
Right. It's like, even if what I'm doing isn't great, at least I know what to expect.
Exactly. It's that, that old saying, better the devil you know.
Yeah.
And then finally, we come back to those vasanas.
Okay, Vasa.
Yeah, those deep mental impressions. And they have this tendency to just kind of pull us back towards those familiar patterns. It's like a needle on a record player. It naturally wants to fall back into that well-worn groove.
It's the path of least resistance.
It is.
Yeah.
And so all of these factors combined, they really make habit change a challenge, to say the least.
Yeah, it's like we're up against this army of resistance, both internally and externally.
We are. But understanding those root causes, that's really the first step towards liberation.
Okay, so that gives us a much clearer picture of why these habits are so persistent. It's this combination of comfort, the quick reward, the fact that we're often doing it unconsciously, the fear of change, and then those deep-seated mental impressions. So, okay, that's helpful to understand the problem. But now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about solutions. Our sources really emphasize this idea of vows. What exactly is a vow in this context, and what makes it a more effective tool than just making a general resolution, like a New Year's resolution?
Yeah. A vow, or a sankalpa, as it's called in Sanskrit, it's really about structure and intentionality.
Okay.
It's not just a wishy-washy, oh, I should probably do this.
Right.
It's a very clear, conscious, deliberate commitment to a specific action or way of being for a defined period of time.
Okay, so that time-bound aspect, that's what sets it apart.
That's key, yes. It's not vague and open-ended like a lot of resolutions that kind of fizzle out quickly. It's like creating this container, this commitment container, for a specific amount of time.
Right. So instead of saying, I'm going to be healthier, it's for the next 7 days, I'm going to eat at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day.
Exactly. And that specificity, combined with the clear time frame, makes the goal feel much less overwhelming and much more achievable.
Right. We can wrap our minds around it.
We can.
It feels doable. Okay, I like that. So what are some of the other reasons why vows can be such a potent tool for change? Why are they so effective?
Well, one of the immediate benefits is that it helps us to break down these seemingly huge challenges into much smaller, more manageable chunks. Because saying, I'm never going to eat sugar again, that can feel daunting.
Yeah, impossible.
Impossible, yeah. But committing to avoiding sugar for just, say, 10 days, that feels much more doable. And that increases our chances of success, which is so important for building momentum.
Right. It's like training for a marathon, right? You don't start by trying to run 26 miles on day 1. You break it down into smaller, manageable runs.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. Each time you successfully complete a vow, you're not just achieving that specific goal, you're also strengthening your willpower muscle.
Oh.
It's like any muscle in the body. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
You're giving it a workout.
You are. And that makes taking on future challenges, maybe even bigger challenges, feel less daunting. You've proven to yourself that you can do it.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
It is.
Success breeds more success.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're building that inner capacity for change.
We are. And those short-term, focused vows, they can actually pave the way for lasting change. Because by intentionally choosing a different behavior for a limited period of time, we start to disrupt those old ingrained neural pathways, those grooves we were talking about.
We're creating new
We
grooves.
are. It's like temporarily diverting a river. If you keep the new channel open long enough, eventually the water might prefer that new path.
It becomes the new default.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're essentially rewiring our brains.
Yeah, exactly.
Through these conscious commitments. Now, what about when we inevitably stumble? Because let's be real, breaking habits, it's not always this linear upward trajectory.
It's not.
There's going to be bumps along the way. There's going to be times when we slip up, we fall back into old patterns. So how does this framework of a vow, how does that help us to navigate those moments?
Well, that's where the flexibility of a vow is really valuable.
Yeah.
It's unlike a New Year's resolution where if you break it, you feel like, okay, I failed.
Game over.
Game over.
Right.
But with a vow, because it's time-bound, it allows for that recommitment without this overwhelming sense of guilt or defeat. So let's say you have a 7-day vow to avoid processed foods, and you slip up on day 3.
Happens to the best of us.
It does. Well, you just acknowledge it, maybe try to understand what triggered the slip-up, and then you simply start a new 7-day vow. It's not about perfection. It's about the ongoing practice of intention and recommitment.
Right. It's like it's okay to stumble. It's not the end of the world.
Exactly. It's part of the process.
Just get back up and keep going. Okay, that takes a lot of pressure off. I like that. So let's get practical. How do we actually put this into practice? What are the key steps to taking an effective vow, a vow that will actually stick?
Well, our sources give us some really clear guidance on this. And the first step is specificity.
Specificity, okay.
We touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
But it's so important. The clearer you are about what you're committing to, the easier it is to stay focused and track your progress. So instead of saying, I want to eat healthier, you'd say, for the next 7 days, I'm going to avoid all processed sugar.
Right, so we're eliminating the ambiguity.
Exactly.
Okay.
A defined time frame, as we talked about. And starting with shorter durations is always a good idea. 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. You can always extend it once you've completed the initial period.
Start small.
Yeah, start small.
Okay, what else?
Write it down.
Oh, write it down, okay.
Yeah, that act of actually writing down your vow, it strengthens your resolve. It makes it more real. It's like making a formal agreement with yourself.
I like that. So we're making it tangible, getting it out of our heads and onto paper.
Exactly. And cultivate self-compassion.
Oh, self-compassion, yes.
This is so important.
Nice, good advice.
Yeah, because you're going to have setbacks.
You are.
And when you do, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just acknowledge it, learn from it, and recommit as soon as possible.
So progress over perfection.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And anything else that can help us to make these vows more effective?
Yeah, sharing your progress and intentions with a supportive community. It could be a friend, a family member, a mentor, a support group. Just having that external accountability and encouragement can make a big difference.
Right, we don't have to do it alone.
We don't.
Okay, so we've got the steps, we've got the framework. Now, our sources also talk about this idea of sanyama. What is sanyama, and how does it fit into this whole process of breaking free from those unwanted habits?
So sanyama is a Sanskrit word that's often translated as self-restraint or mastery over our senses and desires. But it's not about suppression. It's not about denying ourselves everything we enjoy.
It's not about deprivation.
No. It's more about developing a conscious awareness of our impulses and learning to direct our energy and attention in a way that's aligned with our values and goals.
Okay, so we're not trying to shut down our desires. We're just trying to become more aware of them and make conscious choices about how we respond to them.
That's it.
Okay, so how does cultivating sanyama, how does that actually make our lives better?
Well, one of the most immediate benefits is increased mental clarity.
Okay.
When we're not constantly reacting to every thought, craving, or distraction, our minds naturally become calmer, clearer, more focused.
There's less noise.
Less noise, exactly.
Okay, so less mental clutter, more clarity. I like that. What else?
It also creates a deep sense of inner stability.
Okay.
When we're not constantly being tossed around by our impulses, we feel more grounded, more resilient, less reactive to external circumstances.
We're more in control.
We are.
Okay, and is there anything else?
Yeah, and perhaps surprisingly, sanyama can actually lead to a deeper, more lasting sense of joy.
Oh, okay. Explain that one.
So often, we seek happiness through external gratification, through indulging every desire.
Right, that's kind of the message we get from society, right?
It is.
Just get more stuff, do more things, you'll be happy.
Yeah, But that kind of happiness, it's often fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying. True happiness, the kind that lasts, it comes from within. It comes from this inner mastery, from knowing that you're not a slave to your impulses.
Okay, so it's a more sustainable kind of happiness,
It is.
not dependent on external circumstances.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And one of the sources that we looked at used a really vivid analogy to describe this.
Yes.
It compared the mind without sanyama to a wild, untamed fire.
Oh, that's a great one.
It has the potential to provide warmth and light, but if it's not controlled, it can easily burn everything down.
Yeah, a great visual. So sanyama is about learning to harness that fire, to direct its energy in a constructive way.
Okay, so we've talked about vows, we've talked about sanyama, we've got all these tools for change. But, what about those times when we're trying to implement these things and we still mess up? What about failure? How should we deal with that?
Failure is a part of the process.
It is.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And the key is to shift our perspective on it. Instead of viewing it as this catastrophic defeat, let's see it as valuable feedback.
Okay.
It's an opportunity to learn more about our triggers, our weaknesses, the specific challenges that we face. It's information that we can use to adjust our approach.
So it's data, not disaster.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And then the most important thing is to recommit as soon as possible.
Okay.
Don't wait for Monday. Don't wait for next month. Acknowledge the slip-up, learn from it, and then gently guide yourself back on track.
You don't need to wait. Just pick yourself up and keep going.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also acknowledge and celebrate the progress you've already made.
Yeah.
Even if it's small, it's still progress.
Celebrate the small wins. Okay, and what about when we're really struggling? What if we feel like we're just not getting it? We're not making any progress.
Don't hesitate to reach out for support. Talk to someone you trust. Join a support group. Find a mentor. You don't have to do this alone.
Okay, so it's about reframing failure, recommitting, acknowledging our progress, and seeking support when we need it.
Yes.
That's really helpful. Now, let's think about how all of this applies to our listener, to you. How can you take these ideas and actually use them to make positive changes in your own life?
Well, the sources we've looked at offer a ton of practical examples.
Okay, let's hear a few.
For example, let's say you're struggling with an addiction. You can use those time-bound vows to start replacing that harmful behavior with something healthier.
Okay, one step at a time.
Yeah. Or if you're constantly battling negative thoughts, you could make a vow to spend 5 minutes every day practicing gratitude.
Okay, focusing on the positive.
Exactly. Or if you want to improve your eating habits, you could vow to cook all of your meals at home for a week.
Okay, that's a good one.
And for those of us who spend way too much time on our phones,
Oh, yeah.
a vow to have specific phone-free periods each day could be really helpful.
Like during meals or before bed.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And we've seen examples of people using vows to overcome procrastination, reduce negative self-talk, improve focus, all sorts of things.
So these tools, they're really versatile.
They are. They can be applied to so many different areas of our lives.
Okay, so the big takeaway here is that while our habits can feel really powerful, we're not powerless. We have the ability to change, to create new patterns, to break free from those things that are holding us back. It's not easy, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and it starts with awareness, commitment, and that inner mastery that we call sanyama.
Exactly. And we really encourage you to think about what you've heard today and to consider taking just one small, specific, time-bound vow.
Yeah, choose something that resonated with you, something that feels doable, and just see what happens. You might be surprised by the results.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up today's deep dive. Consider one area of your life where making a small, conscious commitment, a vow, could unlock a significant sense of inner freedom.
What would become possible for you then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we've looked through all these resources, a really clear and consistent theme sort of emerges, and it aligns, perfectly with what Gurudev has taught for so long, which is that our daily, often unconscious actions, those are the things that really weave the fabric of our habits. And then these habits, in turn, really, really influence the direction our lives take. But the empowering message, and I think, this is something that Gurudev always underscores, is that we actually have the ability to kind of consciously redirect these patterns through the power of intention and through, what we would call sankalpas or vows.
I think our mission is to really extract the most valuable, the most actionable insights on how habits form. But crucially, how we can actually apply the power of these vows to create some real positive change in our lives. And do this in a way that feels empowering and not overwhelming.
Totally. And I think, recognizing the impact of our vasanas, which Gurudev speaks about often, right? These deep impressions that reside within us and often act as kind of these powerful, often unseen drivers of our habitual tendencies. So it's through the cultivation of sanyama, which is that mindful self-mastery, that conscious awareness, that we can kind of observe and gently steer these patterns, aligning our actions with our deepest intentions, which is, one of the keystones of Gurudev's guidance.
So let's just start with the basics here, right? How do habits even take root? The material we're looking at outlines something called, it's often called a habit loop. Trigger, routine, reward. Can you break that down for us a little bit in the context of our daily lives?
Sure. So the habit loop, offers a really practical way of looking at this. So imagine you have a trigger. Maybe it's the feeling of boredom in the afternoon, let's say. And then this trigger initiates a routine. So maybe you automatically reach for a sugary snack. And then following that routine, there's a reward. There's some sort of reward, right? Whether it's a temporary kind of energy boost or just the pleasant taste, that kind of thing. And I think what's really fascinating here is that it's not just the reward itself that matters, but it's the anticipation of the reward. That's what actually strengthens the neural pathway and really cements that connection between, boredom in the afternoon and reaching for that sugary snack.
So it's almost like the anticipation is kind of like the glue that really holds this habit loop together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's building that connection stronger each time.
That's so interesting. So the sources that we're looking at, they seem to emphasize that these habits become so ingrained because of this constant repetition and then this emotional connection that we develop with this reward, even if it's super fleeting. There's also a suggestion that one of the biggest reasons why negative habits persist is just a simple lack of awareness. Like we're not even aware of the fact that we're kind of operating on autopilot.
Right, exactly. And I think this lack of awareness is where Gurudev's concept of vasanas becomes particularly relevant because, these deep impressions that he speaks of, they can operate, kind of beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. And they're influencing our impulses. They're driving those automatic habitual patterns. So we might find ourselves reacting in certain ways, drawn to certain behaviors without fully understanding, where that's coming from, the underlying conditioning. And so that's where, Gurudev often, really emphasizes that practices like meditation become so crucial, right, as a first step in recognizing these patterns.
Okay, so if we're able to start recognizing these patterns, how do we actually begin to shift them? The material you shared talks a lot about the power of vows or sankalpas in this process. What exactly are they, and what makes them different from, I don't know, just a casual resolution or a wish that we make?
Right. So a sankalpa, a vow, as Gurudev would explain it, it's a deep resolve, a very focused intention that's consciously directed towards a specific outcome. So it's much more potent than, just making a casual resolution because it involves this deliberate commitment of your will. It's like setting a clear direction for your energy, a firm declaration to yourself. And, the very act of forming the sankalpa begins to subtly reshape your inner landscape, which I think is really fascinating.
Not powerful. So these vows, these sankalpas, what makes them so effective in breaking free from these unwanted habits? What's actually happening there?
Well, a few key things. Firstly, a well-defined vow, it brings like this laser-like clarity to your intention. It cuts through, all the mental clutter and the kind of the vague desire for change. You know exactly what you're committing to. And I think that minimizes internal conflict and strengthens your resolve, right? Secondly, and this resonates deeply with what Gurudev emphasizes about inner strength, is that consistently honoring your vows, even the small ones, builds this profound self-trust and a sense of inner capability.
Yeah.
You start to see yourself as someone who can actually follow through on their intentions.
Like each time you actually uphold a commitment to yourself, it's almost like you're reinforcing this inner strength.
Exactly. It's like, hey, I did what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
And that builds over time.
That makes total sense. So what else contributes to the power of vows?
Well, they actively disrupt those ingrained automatic patterns that we were talking about earlier, right? Because by consciously choosing to act differently in a specific situation, you're essentially inserting this moment of mindful awareness into what was previously an unconscious reaction. You're creating a space for a new choice to emerge. And I think, something that the sources highlight that's really, really important is that vows allow for flexibility and renewal without that kind of heavy burden of guilt. So if you slip up, it's not seen as a complete failure. It's seen as an opportunity to learn and recommit, right? So this approach of continuous intention, it's far more sustainable, and I think it aligns really beautifully with Gurudev's teachings on progress over perfection.
Yeah, that emphasis on self-compassion.
Yeah.
It's not about beating yourself up. It's about, okay, I slipped up. What can I learn from this? And, just keep moving forward.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about recommitting and starting fresh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we formulate these vows, these powerful vows? How do we take them? The sources give some concrete, actionable steps.
Yeah, they do. And they're incredibly practical. And again, I think they align really well with the principles that Gurudev shares often. So the first key is to start with something that feels manageable and to define a time frame for your vow. So, instead of this kind of broad, open-ended commitment, and me say, okay, for the next week, I'm going to dedicate 15 minutes each morning to a breathing practice,
Yeah.
as taught by Gurudev, for example, right?
Yeah.
So you make it very specific, and that makes it much less daunting, and it gives you a clear focus.
Right. So starting small, making it specific and time-bound.
Exactly. And then, the vow itself needs to be really specific and actionable. So saying, I will be more mindful. It's a nice aspiration, but it's a bit vague. But a more effective vow might be, okay, during each meal this week, I will consciously put my phone away and focus on the taste and the texture of my food, right? So the more clearly you define the action, the easier it is to actually implement it and track your progress.
So instead of being kind of this vague intention, it's something you can literally check off. You're like, yes, I did that during this meal.
Exactly. And then the sources also strongly recommend actually writing your vow down. And I think this really simple act of putting pen to paper solidifies the intention and makes it more tangible.
Yeah, it's like you're almost signing a contract with yourself.
Exactly.
It's not just floating around in your head. It's like, no, this is real. I wrote this down.
Yeah. And then the final step they talk about is daily reflection. And I think this is a really, really crucial element because daily reflection gives you this invaluable insight. It allows you to track how you're progressing, to kind of acknowledge any small victories that you're having, and also to become more aware of any internal resistance or challenges that arise. Because, the self-awareness is key to understanding those deeper vasanas that Gurudev talks about, right? What are the underlying tendencies that are making this particular change, difficult for me? And by observing those patterns, you gain this power to address them with greater understanding and compassion.
So it's like this daily check-in. Okay, how did I do today? What were the challenges? How did I respond? And then just kind of keep iterating from there.
Exactly.
Now, the sources discuss sanyama quite a bit,
Yeah.
and it's often translated as self-discipline. But I think in the context of, Gurudev's teachings, it's understood more as a conscious management of our energy rather than just pure suppression.
Yeah, totally. Sanyama, I think in Gurudev's philosophy, it's not about this rigid denial or this forceful suppression of our desires. It's about cultivating this deep awareness of our inner energy and then consciously directing it in ways that serve our well-being and our intentions. It's about becoming the master of our own inner landscape and making these mindful choices about where we invest our attention and our energy. And I think that's a much more sustainable, a little bit more harmonious approach than just trying to clamp down on our natural impulses.
Yeah. It's not about just, no, you can't do that. It's about
Uh-huh.
understanding, okay, this is the energy. Where do I want it to go? So what are some practical ways that we can cultivate this conscious energy management, this sanyama, in our everyday lives?
Sure. I mean, there are several. One really, really fundamental practice, and again, this is something that Gurudev emphasizes often, is to pause before reacting impulsively. Taking even just a few deep breaths before we speak or before we act can create that space for a conscious choice, right? And another aspect of this is practicing moderation in all areas of life, in our consumption of food, in our consumption of technology, entertainment, even excessive talking. And then creating those moments of stillness and silence through practices like meditation. This is so crucial for enhancing self-awareness and strengthening our ability to observe our impulses without immediately acting on them, right? So it's like creating that pause. And I think also surrounding ourselves with positive influences and engaging in activities that uplift our energy, those are key components of cultivating the sanyama.
Yeah, it's almost like creating these little pockets of awareness and intentionality throughout our day. You know, it's realistic to expect that we might stumble on the way.
Hmm.
So what happens when we, maybe break a vow or find ourselves falling back into old habits? How do we stay committed when we encounter these inevitable setbacks?
Right. So the sources and Gurudev's teachings, they offer this really supportive perspective here. And, transformation is a journey. It has its ups and downs. It's not this linear progression, right?
Right.
So if you find yourself breaking a vow, the most important thing is to avoid getting caught up in a cycle of guilt or self-blame. And just acknowledge what happened, gently recommit to your intention, and keep moving forward. Because each time you make a conscious effort, even if there are stumbles along the way, you're gradually weakening that old conditioning and reinforcing those new desired patterns, right? So it's about the overall direction of the consistent effort. It's not about achieving absolute perfection from the outset.
Yeah, that's so key. It's not about being perfect. It's about, stumbling, getting up, dusting yourself off, and trying again. So to make this really concrete, the sources we have, they offer some really practical examples of vows that we can consider for creating positive change. And a lot of them, align beautifully with a lot of the practices that Gurudev has recommended as well. Can you share a few of those?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, for cultivating mindful eating, a vow could be to commit to eating at least one meal a day without any distractions, right? So no phone, no television. So you can really savor your food and be more aware of your body's signals, right? For fostering digital discipline, setting specific screen-free hours each day, perhaps an hour before bed to promote better sleep and more presence. For enhancing mental clarity and inner peace, dedicating, even just a small amount of time each day, even 10 or 15 minutes to meditation or breathing practice, as Gurudev teaches, can be profoundly transformative.
Yeah, yeah. Those are some great ones. What are some other examples from the material?
Sure. So there were also suggestions around cultivating gratitude, like making a commitment to write down a few things that you're grateful for each day. For shifting negative thought patterns, consciously replacing one negative thought with a positive affirmation each morning. To enhance focus and productivity, commit to a specific block of uninterrupted time for focused work each day. And again, for overall well-being, a vow to engage in some form of physical activity for a set duration each day. And then finally, for cultivating emotional balance, taking a few deep breaths, pausing before reacting in challenging situations. That's a powerful one.
Yeah. So many great examples and all very tangible and manageable. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what are the key insights that you hope our listener will take away, especially in light of Gurudev's wisdom on habits and intentions?
I think the central understanding, and this is something that's so deeply rooted in Gurudev's teachings, is that while our habits really do shape our lives, we are not bound by them. And through the conscious and intentional use of vows, of sankalpas, we have a really powerful means to reshape these patterns. And the foundation for all of this transformative process is sanyama, right? This mindful awareness and conscious direction of our energy, which allows us to kind of recognize and gently navigate those deeply ingrained vasanas. And ultimately, it leads us towards greater freedom and fulfillment.
So the invitation is to really reflect on what we've talked about today, and maybe even just pick one small, specific, time-bound vow that resonates with you. Maybe one of the examples that we've talked about. Start with something achievable. Be patient with yourself, and just see what kind of an impact it has.
Yeah. And maybe just a final thought to leave with is to consider Gurudev's profound understanding of the interconnectedness of
Yeah.
Our inner and outer worlds. So how might intentionally cultivating sanyama in just one area of your life, whether it's your relationship with your thoughts, your physical well-being, your interactions with others, how might that initial shift, ripple outwards and positively influence other aspects of your life and ultimately guide you towards a more purposeful and joyful destiny, which is something that Gurudev so beautifully illuminates in his teachings.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder as we wrap up today's deep dive. Consider one area of your life where making a small, conscious commitment, a vow, could unlock a significant sense of inner freedom.
What would become possible for you then?
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday for another deep dive.
See you then.